Yes, sir. We are live now.
So, welcome everyone for the today's webinar, which we are organizing to showcase the initiatives taken by the IUCN in respect of the Bonn Challenge and forest landscape restoration and promotion of nature-based solution standards. And this webinar series will be of 3 episodes and starting from 31st to 2nd of September, because 2nd of September there is a global media campaign of the IUCN, this Bonn Challenge initiative, for which from the global team and the panelists will have deliberations during the meeting. So first of all, let me welcome on behalf of IUCN all the panelists and all the participants. And we have a very rich team of panelists today, ranging from all the sectors, electronic media, print media, from the government side, the experience, rich experience from the civil society organizations. And but just before we move further, let me just give you a brief introduction about the IUCN. As many of you may be aware, but there may be many people who are the participants, they may not be aware about the IUCN in detail. So very briefly, the IUCN International Union for Conservation of Nature is the oldest organization related to the environmental issues, the conservation network, largest conservation network globally, which was made just after the World War II. And India has been part of this initiative right from the beginning when the initial instrument was signed. Homi Baba represented India. And its global headquarters is in Switzerland, Gland, and it is the largest conservation network having more than 1,400 institutional members globally. And it is unique partnership in the sense it is a hybrid type of organization where the governments are also members, civil society organizations are also members, and specialized institutions are also members. So taking it further, just like Government of India, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change is also a member of IUCN, it is as a national government. And apart from this, IUCN has a commission system. There are 6 IUCN commissions. Across these commissions, we have more than 15,000 IUCN commission members. And these commissions relate to the Species Survival Commission, Commission on Education and Communication, Commission on Environmental Law. And the most prominent product or knowledge product by which you recognize IUCN is the red listing of the species. Because if IUCN categorizes any of the species as vulnerable, threatened, accordingly that triggers the conservation action in respect of that species, and in a way that conservation action also ensures that the ecosystem services or the interlinked services which are provided by the various species in the ecosystem, they are sustained and we make effort for their conservation. And IUCN is also having the observer status with the United Nations General Assembly. And the importance of it, because different nations, they speak of their respective interests confined to their geographic boundaries. But voice of the environment, the voice of the ecosystem, voice of the species, which is of common concern to all, that is raised by the representative of the IUCN. Accordingly, the globally, regionally, and locally at the national level or international level, various conservation agenda is set in. And it leads to various type of legislations and some type of protocols and the conventions. And IUCN in its journey of more than 70 years has played a very vital role in shaping the global conservation agenda, maybe the world conservation strategy, the coming up of the 3 Rio conventions related to the climate change, biodiversity, desertification, the sustainable development goals, and now in the post-2020 framework, we have the biodiversity framework, which is being finalized. And also the nature-based solutions. Ultimately, when we see that even the present COVID pandemic, which has brought entire world at crossroads, at a standstill, is somewhere connected to disruption of the ecosystem services, our disconnect with the nature. And one of the biggest lessons which we have to learn from the COVID, that to ensure care for the nature. And IUCN has also promoted nature-based solution standards. And 23rd of July, last month only, where IUCN has launched global nature-based solution standards, so that whatever activities we do in the development initiatives and others, we have to ensure that our connect with the nature, the services which are provided by the nature, they are sustained. And we have to ensure that the water, air, and soil health, these are the important factors which has to be ensured to ensure that the planet Earth is livable for each one of us. And now taking it further, let me just show you a very brief documentary which showcases the IUCN journey for more than 70 years. So may I request Vishnu just to play that IUCN movie? Documentary which showcases the IUCN. Thank you very much. And this very short documentary, it captures the IUCN initiatives in its journey for more than 70 years. Another very important event which IUCN organizes, that is the World Conservation Congress. That is the largest global environmental related issues forum where the various motions and resolutions, they are adopted during the World Conservation Congress. And those motions, they set the conservation agenda for next 3-4 years as per the IUCN Global Program. So just very briefly, I will show you another short documentary. This World Conservation Congress was supposed to happen in the June this year only in Marseille, France. Now it is happening in January 8 to 15, 2021 at the same venue. So Vishnu, can you please show that short documentary on the World Conservation Congress? Thank you very much. And now coming to the today's main theme of webinar which relates to the Bonn Challenge, and we will be deliberating on the role of media in promoting the Bonn Challenge targets, promoting nature-based solution standards, nature conservation, landscape restoration, and for which we have eminent panelists. And may I now request Dr. Vasanti, who will be moderating today's session. Dr. Vasanti is an active advocate for more accountable media and heads the Center for Media Studies. She is an independent research-based think tank, and everybody knows that by the CMS Vatavaran Film Festival, which she organizes every year, largest international film festival and forum on environment and wildlife. He specializes in strategy development, designing, researching, evaluating communication initiatives and development programs. He has a PhD in media studies and has double master's degree in applied psychology and management. And her main areas of interest, apart from the media, the CMS Vatavaran Film Festival that include children, gender and conservation, they are the areas they are core to her heart. And welcome, Dr. Vasanti, to take today's proceedings further.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vivek Saxena. I'd like to compliment your team and IUCN India for organizing this webinar. I know the name sounds very heavy and complicated, but actually it's a very simple and very important issue. So namaskar and welcome again to all the panelists and all the participants to this very important issue of forest restoration. Today we will discuss what this global commitment and national pledge implies to all of us. We will understand and know more from a very esteemed panel of speakers on what the Bonn Challenge mean and how media in its varied formats and forms can contribute in keeping this important pledge. I'm sure most of you know what forests are. As you can see, that's a forest in Delhi in Vasant Kunj, which I visit every day in the morning in my background. And so most of us are familiar with forest and how important they are for our survival. However, we don't know enough on what this intricate relationship between forests and us, our economy, our health, our food, our water, our soil, our air, our biodiversity, our livelihood, and even our culture. They're all very intricately it has a relationship with forests. That is why perhaps our media, which is with its competing priorities, is unable to contribute sufficiently in this endeavor. We hope with this webinar will be useful in this direction in both understanding the issues involved and also learn from previous experiences and examples to further engage media and communication professionals in this endeavor. Let me start by inviting Ms. Swati Hingorani to first explain briefly on what is the Bonn Challenge and its importance. First, let me introduce Ms. Swati, who is the Project Knowledge and Impact Officer in the IUCN Global Forest and Climate Program in Washington. She's also worked in India with Wildlife Conservation Trust and Sanctuary Asia. I know it's very early in the morning for you, Swati. Welcome. And before I give the floor to you, I'll ask Vivekji to play a small promotional video and then hand it over to you.
Welcome, Swati, and let me first introduce a little about the Bonn Challenge, that what is the Bonn Challenge, and you will be deliberating further during the discussion. So there is one promotional video regarding the Bonn Challenge Global Media Campaign, which is being done on 2nd of September. So please, Vishnu, can you just play the brief documentary on the Bonn Challenge?
Dr. Vivek. Over to you, Swati.
Hi everyone, I'm Swati Hingorani from IUCN's Global Forest Conservation Program. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. So I'll be talking a little bit about what the Bonn Challenge is and its importance, and also where I see the media playing a role. So the Bonn Challenge is a global goal to bring 150 million hectares of degraded and deforested landscapes into restoration by 2020 and 350 million hectares by 2030. It was launched by IUCN and the government of Germany in 2011. And to date, we have over 210 million hectares committed by 61 countries, 8 states, and 5 associations. So this week, on September 2nd, we celebrate the first goal year of the Bonn Challenge. And as you've seen from the video, a little under a decade of forest landscape restoration, implementation, and progress. And so this campaign is called Restore Our Future, and we're kickstarting the celebrations with this webinar. So I'm really happy to be here today. The Bonn Challenge is underpinned by the Forest Landscape or FLR approach, and that's a nature-based solution that IUCN developed in 2000. FLR is the ongoing process of regaining ecological functionality and enhancing human well-being across deforested or degraded forest landscapes. So why is this important? Forests provide more than 86 million green jobs, and they support the livelihoods of many more. Degradation through human activities is negatively impacting at least 3.2 billion people, and 90% of people who live in extreme poverty depend directly on forests for their survival. By 2050, land degradation and climate change are predicted to reduce crop yields by an average of 10% globally and up to 50% in certain regions, and could force up to 700 million people to migrate. The latest special report of the IPCC says that the world needs an increase of 1 billion hectares under forests to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And the Bonn Challenge can help us reach these goals. In 2019, IUCN assessed progress in just 5 pledged countries. And just from that small subset, we know that already more than 45 million hectares are under restoration. And more importantly, that these hectares under restoration resulted in over 350,000 short and long-term jobs, and there was potential for 1.38 billion tons of CO2 sequestered. So the impacts of restoring degraded and deforested landscapes are immense. India actually has the largest Bonn Challenge commitment to date at 21 million hectares. And this is a real accomplishment because achieving this pledge will help generate rural livelihoods, build our resilience to climate change, and protect the biodiversity that provides us with ecosystem services like clean drinking water. And it can also help India reach its goal of 33% forest cover. The 2019 report by the Forest Survey of India puts the country right now at 25%, so we have a way to go. Now, where does the media come in all of this? I would say that it plays a really big role, and that the media can help advance FLR and the Bonn Challenge in 3 key ways. It can educate, it can inspire, and it can sustain change. Restoration often gets mixed up with one-off mass tree planting activities. This is not FLR. FLR involves working at the landscape level to bring together stakeholders to address the drivers of deforestation and degradation. For FLR and the Bonn Challenge, both biodiversity conservation and human livelihoods are prioritized, and we want to focus on using land sustainably in a variety of ways, such as protected wildlife reserves, regenerated forests, ecological corridors, and agroforestry. So the media can play a big role in educating people on what restoration actually entails. It can tell people what the rationale for FLR and the Bonn Challenge is and explain how the loss of forests impacts their lives. For example, just a few months ago, we saw the recent floods in Bombay and how they've shown us how important our mangroves are. But if you look at a news article, either on the paper or on TV, you won't hear very much about the loss of our mangroves and how it's impacting the city. So the first and the most important role the media can play is in really educating people about why we need restoration in the Bonn Challenge. Showing positive stories of success can inspire more implementation. So if media houses can go dig for stories that show where and how communities and the government have worked jointly to restore landscapes, this proof of concept will help bring in new donors and partners for FLR. We've seen this before. Decades ago, the media made sure that chlorofluorocarbons and the damage to the ozone layer were common knowledge in households. Today, it's being done for plastic. So the power of the media to inspire change is immense, and we need to start leveraging this power to make FLR and the Bonn Challenge a more well understood and broadly used solution. Lastly, for FLR to be successful, it needs to be forward-looking. We need to be anticipating the future needs of a landscape stakeholders over the medium and the long term. Now, on a daily basis, we're surrounded by a barrage of information and news. The media tells us what should stay top of mind, and so it plays a critical role in sustaining engagement on the Bonn Challenge. A major part of our September 2nd celebrations is engaging the media. For 24 hours, we will be sharing evidence from countries around the world that shows exactly how their Bonn Challenge commitments are being used to advance rural development, climate change mitigation and adaptation, and biodiversity conservation. So I encourage journalists, TV anchors, other media persons listening in on this webinar to reach out to IUCN so we can help you educate, inspire, and sustain action on FLR. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Swati. That was quite comprehensive, and thanks for giving the context of the global challenge and the India challenge and what role you think the media can play in this particular campaign. Let me hand over the. I'm sure we will have more questions on that. I certainly do have some questions. We'll come back to on that. I'll request all the participants, whatever questions you have, to put it in the chat box. I'll take it up in the Q&A session after all the panelists speak. Let me hand it over now to Dr. Vivek Saxena back, because I think we didn't have the representative from the ministry join us, but because Dr. Saxena has worked so closely with them, especially on landscape restoration, forest landscape restoration projects with the government, I'm sure he will be able to give us a broad overview of the initiatives that Government of India has done, especially to manage the huge commitment and the ambitious pledge it has taken for the Bonn Challenge. So over to you, Dr. Vivek.
Thank you, Vasanti, and also thanks to Swati for telling comprehensively about the Bonn Challenge initiative and its big global media campaign. As in 2011, it was the global launch by IUCN and Government of Germany. So Indian government also pledged during the Paris Climate Change Agreement in 2015 that India will also have around 13 million hectares under forest landscape restoration under the Bonn Challenge by 2020, and additional 8 million hectares by 2030. As you know that India also hosted that one of the largest event related to one of the Rio Convention, that is United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, the Conference of Parties, the COP14, that was held in India last year. And that itself showcases that at the Government of India level, the concern for addressing restoration and land degradation challenges. And during COP14 of the UNCCD, Indian Prime Minister announced that India will have additional 5 million hectares under the restoration pledge. So you see the challenges for India are tremendous, because we have India has to develop, we have a limited large population, land resources, lot of demographic pressures of humans as well as the cattle. At the same time, the restoration initiatives are also to be given precedence. So accordingly, there are a number of afforestation programs supported for the plantation, the landscape restoration, watershed management of different ministries. It is not only the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change, because as it was explained that landscape restoration is not just planting of trees. It is the overall landscape approach. That means if you have a forest area, if the forests are degraded, you have to restore them, improve their stocking, and the surrounding ecosystem services which is forest provided. If there is a land surrounding, you can involve community and having agroforestry, trees on the farms, the fruit plants also, the improvement of the wetland ecosystems also, the water table. So these in total, when we talk of, this is the landscape restoration.
Right.
And based on this, a large number of programs are already in progress. And IUCN is also supporting Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change under the Bonn Challenge reporting process. Because the first report, as per the 2020 pledge, because 2020 is the year, but it will be just like the by end of the December or by early next year, all the data which comes for the achievement towards this pledge, then we can say that what has been progress towards this. And this bond challenge is something because already a number of plantation, afforestation, all these watershed management initiatives are going on, but it is some sort of also a healthy, you can say, competition or demonstration of initiatives between various countries and also at the global level. There's some sort of a appeal to global community to come forward, take care of the nature, ensure that the planet Earth remains a livable planet, and take initiatives. So that's why this Bonn Challenge Global Media Campaign on 2nd of September, it is a renewed commitment to bring all the global community at a common platform so that they renew their pledge, they enhance their pledge, and they take action at the local level. So these are some of my thoughts in respect of the IUCN support for these programs. We are supporting the state governments also in India through the IUCN ROAM tool, that is Restoration Opportunities Assessment Methodology, so that where the restoration opportunities occur and accordingly the restoration actions are to be initiated. So with these words, thank you very much, Vasanti ji, and
Dr. Vivek, I have actually another question just to add. I'm sure people who are listening in and all the panelists themselves are very curious about where we are today in terms of our achievements. I know Swati mentioned something, but I think it's important. I don't know whether you'll be able to answer it, but I'm putting you in a spot. I will apologize, but I just wanted to know if you would be able to give us some rough estimates about where we are in terms of reaching those goals. Because before I move on to the media, let's just consolidate what we know on that.
Reaching towards those goals, I think the progress is good because we are supporting in collating data from various states. But it will take, I think, some time because whatever has been pledged initially till 2020, I think once all the data comes, it will be better than that what has been pledged.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, Swati, please add to that.
Yeah, Vasanti, I can add to that. So IUCN has developed the Barometer of Restoration Progress, which is a progress tracking protocol and framework that countries can apply to assess how they're doing on their Bonn Challenge commitments. India was one of the first countries to express interest in applying this protocol. And of course, with COVID, things are slightly delayed, but the intent is when things settle down to start, and continue applying the protocol in India. And so I would say not only is there excellent progress underway, as we will see, through this discussion and over the September 2nd celebrations, but there's also a real interest from the government of India to very closely track progress and figure out where improvements can be made.
That's actually very positive news, and thanks for sharing that, because we always get all the negative news and all about degradation and deforestation, but not much about air forestation and how we are able to increase that scale. So thank you for sharing that, and we'll discuss a little further about that in the next discussion. Let me now move to about media and how media today is much more than just newspapers, television, radio, and is wider with online platforms, social media, and digital modes. Even popular entertainment, which is an important part of our life, are a good source of communication and impacting norms. Today, influencers in each hour of our lives can be popular musicians or Instagram posts or a YouTube video, just like a news item in the newspaper. At CMS Vatavaran, which Dr. Vivek mentioned, Asia's largest film festival and forum exclusively on environment and wildlife, we have used the power of films to engage diverse stakeholders like policymakers, filmmakers, and youth. Let me now turn to our next speaker, Mr. Kartikeya Sarabhai, to hear more about such civil society initiatives that contribute to enable forest landscape restoration in India. Before I hand over the mic to him, I know he doesn't need any introduction, but he's a well-known environmental educator and is founder director of the Center for Environment Education headquartered in Ahmedabad. Kartikeya Bhai has served on many committees set up by the Ministry of Environment and Forests and Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India, primarily focusing on the greening of India's formal education system and initiatives for biodiversity education. He's also been a member of international delegation and councils, including former vice chair of the Indian National Commission of IUCN. For his pioneering efforts, he has received many international awards and recognition, and he has been representing India in many international platforms. So over to you, Kartik Bhai.
Thank you very much, Vasanti and Dr. Saxena and IUCN. We are discussing a very critical issue today, which is how do we involve in some ways many more people in this whole process of greening. And I think then the role of media comes in. We were discussing some of the targets, and the figures which I had seem to indicate that by 2018 we had done something like 9.8 or so million hectares on our way to achieving 13 million in India by 2020 this year, and then again by 2030 going up to 21 million. We must understand the sort of scale of this.
Yes.
That when we are talking about something like adding another 11 million hectares, yes, we are talking about an area something equivalent to Bihar or Ladakh or Telangana. We are not talking about really small projects. At the same time, our initiatives, having already had this long history of forestry in India and well managed in many cases forestry, there is a huge pressure on land. So the rest of this area is going to come from areas which are not fallow in that sense, but are used by people. In fact, even the most degraded lands in India have someone or the other using it. There are some stakeholders on just about every piece of land which you have. Our own campus, which I like to use as a very micro experience, was a 14-acre campus on the outskirts of Ahmedabad, had no tree whatsoever on it. When we started work there, we found that there were a number of people who were using it even without much tree cover. And it took us really a bonding and a forming a partnership, if you like, with the community of cattle herders, Maldaris who lived around us, to say that let us do this. It was almost impossible to do it through policing alone. We later went into, as you know, in India, joint forest management and various other schemes. And therefore, doing partnerships with people is, in a sense, critical if you want to achieve these targets. It's not something which you can do even with government diktat or funds, even though most of the initiatives in this larger scale will have to come from governments.
Of course.
Now, when you talk about government, we should not be talking about national governments, but we should be talking about state, we should be talking about city, panchayats, we should be talking about district government. And I think the first thing which IUCN really can do is to get states and then smaller units to come up with their own numbers in terms of the Bonn challenge. What is the Bonn challenge for me, for instance, as an NGO working in Ahmedabad? What would be a Bonn challenge? What is the expectation of contribution from this district, for instance, or this state? And if you can sort of break it down, you would have many more people having ownership of that target. Now, this is again something which media can popularize, media can tell people what it is, can have local competitions and various other things. And IUCN also, as Vivek ji said, has one of the largest number of NGOs in India working in this field as their members. They also have a number of people who are members of commissions. And so you have a network which is unique, besides the fact that you are working with both state and non-state actors. So I think IUCN, it would be good at the end of these 3 days for IUCN to say, besides what India will do, at least IUCN themselves are going to get involved through its members and through its others in terms of what we do. Now, as some of you know, CEE really works with schools and colleges, is one very large part of our group which we reach out to. And in that group, we are trying to attract individual schools, individual colleges to take up an area and say, we will green this, and put their own targets. And I think now, because of the fact that you have satellite imagery, every school which signs up for this, we can get satellite photographs. I don't know, Swati, what the barometer and the protocol was. I would love to see that. But today you can get information at a sort of micro scale, whether people have in fact done this or not. You will also need to go into agricultural land which are poor and say can someone convert that into forests, for instance. And there the whole question of who pays for this does come up. Like at the international level, it's all very easy for us to say, Brazil, you should not cut any part of your Amazon. But the thing is, the Brazilian people might well say that, look, we are preserving this for the planet. What is it that you are sharing in the expense? But the same thing goes with a farmer or anyone else. And I think we need to develop models that if this is for the common good, what exactly can happen? Now, as some of you know, we also had other experiments like the Science Express. The Science Express went around for biodiversity and then for climate change, had really literally millions of people visiting it. And when we did some research on what happened to students after they saw this train, they saw it only for an hour, but it sparked something in them which made them do action for the rest of the year in the school. And this is really very strong evidence to suggest that events like Vatavaran is doing, you are doing events. Some of these events might seem like they're just isolated things, but they in fact have an impact which spans the whole year. And some of these greening models are such that you can do it at very small levels or at large. This lockdown period, I was in a property which is 20 acres and a forest, which about 100 years ago, I just brought out a little booklet on what I saw. And I was amazed to be next to a hornbill's nest, which I had not seen. I had not, in fact, seen them in Ahmedabad, and to be able to photograph it and see the whole journey. So the fascination of even one tree, let alone a forest, is so great. And these stories can come out. The newspapers are interested in these stories and want to go. Swati mentioned about positive stories, and I think there's no doubt that good case studies and other things are critical. But unfortunately, what seems to sell in newspapers is not necessarily positive stories. People like a disaster, they like a calamity, all that. And the fact that climate change and biodiversity happens slowly, rather than like an air crash or something, it doesn't happen. Now the COVID crisis, because it is global, because it is happening in a time, there's a number generated every day of how many cases, how many deaths. I think the entire global community is working with the scientific community to find a solution. To say that the Bonn challenge requires any less effort would be wrong. If we were to go about it as strongly, if you like, as we do for the COVID, and realizing that this challenge is not only for greening per se, it is also doing something for, basically working for climate change. It's a natural solution for climate change. It's a huge solution for biodiversity. It talks about air pollution. It talks about so many things. And what COVID actually did show was even when the human pressure decreased only that much, in 2-3 months from Jalandhar, you could see the Himalayas. Air pollution cleared up. For the whole generation, they had never seen these things. So it does show what the sort of impact we have. So I would say that policies which involve people are critical, and media is critical for that. You cannot do that without public knowledge. You cannot do it as a government program alone, which is not in partnership, and therefore media is critical. Now you have to recognize that media today also means social media in a very major way. And what is possible today through things which people do, make little films, let people know, is tremendous. What they can do. What we have done this thing with UNEP just now, which is on a plastic tight turner challenge, involving thousands of people trying to see what they can do individually and how they can be multipliers to bring other people into this movement. So I think we are at a very critical point. We must recognize the size and scale of the challenge, and we must recognize the media role in terms of a number of things. And for us, very importantly, the role of IUCN in facilitating the media. I think that's what we can do and we should do. And IUCN has a huge role globally. I'm sure, Swati, you're working on it. But at the India level also, we can do so much. The positive stories is a challenge. How do we do it? And finally, I would say that we must also recognize that the amount of forest loss.
Yes.
If this one challenge, is it a net gain or is it a gross gain? Is it a gain which we want, or is it something we want to add after taking this? I'm not very clear. Maybe someone can help us on that. But I think that we are also losing very rapidly. We get all these figures of one football field going every month, every minute. While we are talking, maybe 2-3 football fields of things have disappeared. So I think we must also know, are we talking about net gain, or are we talking about this much we will do, but on the other hand, you can cut it? And I think that's something which someone knows about Bonn better. I thought those are some of the opening comments which I really wanted to share. And I think it is to do with involving people and involving institutions, even though they are in small ways. We are trying very much to replicate our success at the Greening campus, every other campus we can go to. We are also trying to go to burial grounds. We are trying to go to religious places. We are trying to go to every type of people, so that in a effort, people can do the greening. And we are also emphasizing biodiversity. We've got something like 120 trees which we are promoting in Ahmedabad, and seeing that they not only plant, but they plant with diversity. Thank you very much, Vasan.
Thank you, Kartik Bhai. That, as usual, was very illuminating and very inspiring. And you've already outlined quite a number of ways which media can interact and learn and contribute in the way that we're doing. Just a small word before I go to the next speaker is that just like in the COVID era, there are a lot of fake news and miscommunication happening on environmental issues, including afforestation, and that's why the example that you gave about degradation. Actually, when I was doing my research on studying this, I came across this very interesting fact, and I don't know whether this is news or this is fake news or not, and perhaps Dr. Vivek or Swati can add to it. They say that of the 320 million hectares areas in the country, about 30% or 90 million hectares is wasteland and should immediately be put to economic use. That's what they're saying. But they're saying that this is equivalent to, which is very scary, the states of Rajasthan, MP and Maharashtra put together. That means 30% of India is a wasteland. It's degraded, deforestation. Various reasons like overcultivation, encroachment, soil erosion, depletion of wastelands, roadways, mining. I mean, this is what is happening simultaneously with all the afforestation efforts. So it's actually a very interesting story for many journalists to take up, to talk about this whole parallel deforestation happening along with this whole afforestation efforts that are happening. Swati, do you want to add, or should I just go ahead with the next speaker?
Yeah, I can jump in just really quickly to clarify one or two things. So, Kartik, you raised a really good point. Does the Bonn Challenge consider deforestation? And yes, of course it does. The Bonn Challenge does not in any way say that it is okay or acceptable to cut down primary or standing forest and replace it with restored areas. So what the Bonn Challenge does and what the FLR approach does is it identifies what are the drivers of deforestation and degradation, and it helps address them, and it helps work in tandem with conservation. So to give an example that I think will fit really well in the India context, if you look at a tiger reserve and you look at the communities living in the buffer zone, one of the major reasons for deforestation and degradation of the core area or the main area of the tiger reserve is subsistence agriculture. It's expansion of human livelihoods. And of course, we can't take that away. That's extremely important for people to survive. What FLR would do in that context is it would help make people's small holding farms more productive. And therefore, it would reduce the expansion into standing forest. And then the second thing, Vasanti, that you mentioned, I would let Vivek answer on whether that statistic is true or not. I would just caution us to be careful about the terminology of
Exactly.
wastelands, especially in India, and separating wastelands, or actually degraded and deforested landscapes, from what we tend to view as wastelands. So there are several types of ecosystems where trees are not prevalent. Grasslands, deserts, those are not wastelands. So the one caveat I would say is that 30% figure should only address areas that are actually deforested and degraded, because the Bonn challenge in FLR is not about converting ecosystems. So if it's an ecosystem where there were no trees before, the Bonn challenge does not apply then.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for actually checking on me, because I made a mistake of reading the wrong thing. It was 30% has degraded due to deforestation.
Great,
And
thank you. Yeah.
it's, yeah, you're right, absolutely. And we have to be very careful with the terminology. Thanks for pointing out
Yeah,
that.
that's just one concern that I've seen very much in the media. We
Yes,
look at
happens.
deserts as wastelands.
It
Yeah, and they're
happens
not.
all the
Yeah.
time in the media. So again, there's one more thing that we can flag with the media about what they should be careful when they're talking about such complex issues. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so
Okay,
much.
but ultimately, what Kartik Bhai said is all about leadership and individual initiatives that will enable us to meet any goals, especially the ambitious goals like India has committed to. We have heard about number of initiatives by people also, and a number of them, and organizations like CEE that are working on restoring forests and certain ecosystems. One such initiative I know is by a dynamic civil servant in Tamil Nadu who holds a Guinness Book record of maximum number of tree plantations in a day. Glad to have this officer, Ms. Supriya Sahu, as our next speaker. Supriya ji is a senior Indian IAS officer of Tamil Nadu cadre. Presently, she heads the Tamil Nadu Small Tea Growers Tea Federation based in the beautiful Nilgiris. Previously, she was posted as the Director General Doordarshan, where she worked for more than 3 years. Before that, she was working in the INB ministry, and she has a good understanding of the broadcast sector. She's also worked in various field positions in Tamil Nadu, mainly in the field of health, environment protection, and social sectors. She was awarded the Best Collector Award and the Green Award by the government of Tamil Nadu for her work. So over to you, Supriya ji. Let us hear about your initiatives and experience and inputs on the role of media in achieving environmental challenges and commitments.
Thank you, Vasanti, and thank you, Vivek, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, IUCN. Good evening, everyone, and I'm very happy to be here. Listening very carefully to all the speakers who have been raising very important issues. Let me start by the points which were made by Mr. Kartikeya Sarabhai, very important points, and I just
Yes.
wanted to kind of take off from there. Now, in fact, I am based in Nilgiris district, which is, of course, the Nilgiris Biosphere Reserve. It has many wildlife sanctuaries, and I can say that I think I'm really lucky to be here in the midst of nature, absolutely, in touch with the surroundings that we have here. Also, as the monitoring officer of the Nilgiris district, I'm in close touch with the forest people and looking at various issues that concern the day-to-day affairs of the people over here. Now, coming back to the issues very quickly, Vasanti, you spoke about, the topic today is that what is the role of media in highlighting this issue? I think one observation that I've made being here, I was earlier, 20 years back, I was the district collector here. And that was the time when two things we did. You just spoke about one, which is creating, a kind of a Guinness Park for, planting maximum number of trees. And that was the International Year of Mountains. We wanted to create this record only to create a huge or a massive awareness among the people about the need for afforestation and all that. The second thing, I think perhaps we were the first district in the country to ban the disposable plastic. And that all these two initiatives, they were taken with the help of the community, the local population, the people of Nilgiris. And that is where, I think everything else I would like to base. My arguments are based upon the community, the people, and the initiatives that need to be highlighted. So while talking about the role of media, I think today's world also needs to focus, today's media also needs to focus on micro stories, which are coming from, the local surroundings. It's fine to have to highlight the policies. It is absolutely fantastic to talk about what international organizations are doing. But I think what interests people more is that the action, what's happening on the ground. If we are able to provide some micro stories, they are beautiful stories. I can see it every day happening here in the Nilgiris. For example, here in Nilgiris itself, 25 acres are being reforested again with the support from IUCN Netherlands. And there's one very committed individual who's actually doing it. But I can see that not many people know about that. Not many media organizations have picked up this beautiful story, because this is the story where you have an association of the indigenous communities, kind of actively participating in the conservation issues. So the first point I wanted to highlight was that, like Vasanti, you have been doing the CMS Vatavaran films. We partnered together when we were in Doordarshan, and we highlighted many stories, which were actually not known by a moving theater. I think it's very important to keep highlighting these micro stories. Now, having said that, how do you get these micro stories? If you talk to media people, they would say that, we don't get this. How do we know about these stories? Of course, today's world is more of the social media. All of us know about this. Even through my social media handles, I try to keep on highlighting many such stories. But I think it's very important that the actual, the ground force, which is the forest, the district collectors, they bring out these stories. How do we bring out these stories? Because if you see, while the journalists are trained in various beats, they have the beats which is on politics, which is on different finance, which is on defense. And there are the journalists who are also there, who are allocated duties on environment beats. At the district level, I do not find enough number of trained journalists, who are capable of finding out and highlighting these ground level stories, connecting them to the larger objectives. So I think there is a need for organizations like IUCN to invest in media education at the ground level. If we could have workshops, if we could have seminars, combined seminars with the forest people, we can have seminars with the district collectors, you will see a huge amount of initiatives and stories coming out from the ground force. So that was one point I wanted to highlight. The second point was that some fantastic, series we need to commission. Maybe it could be the community-based media, which is the community radio. A very strong community radio movement is going on in our country, in India. We need to definitely, I think organizations like the Ministry of Environment and Forest and IUCN, they need to, and maybe CMS, they need to kind of tap the community radios to talk about the ground-based stories. For example, there used to be a program by Mr. Mike Pandey on Doordarshan. It was called as Earth Matters. And he told me this fantastic story that when during this program was being telecast on Doordarshan, and he went to a village in Ladakh for some shooting. It was a remote interior village, and he asked for water, in one of the villages from a house. The lady identified him immediately, and he said, "Aap Earth Matters wale sahab hai na, jo Earth Matters ke baare mein baat karte hain." And it was really fabulous because she knew, and they were waiting to watch those kind of fascinating series. So I think it's very important that we invest in some knowledge-based series. That's the second point. The third and the last point at this point I wanted to make was that it's also very important, that we need to invest in some fantastic initiatives at the ground level. For example, in our district, there is a state funding which is available, some amount of money, and we have decided to create something called as the Nature Discovery Centers. For example, we know something about tigers, we know something about elephants, we know something about the afforestation and things like that, but not much we know about them. But if we could create these tiger discovery center or an elephant discovery center in educational institutions, there would be a lot of stories that media will be able to pick up. What are these discovery centers which we are in the process of setting up? Is that they would be the repository of knowledge about these centers. So perhaps about trees, about plants, about the degradation, it's important to set up these nature discovery centers at the district level, at the village level, so that we have everything trickling down from, international level, from Delhi level to the village level. So the 3 points that I'm saying is that we need to come out with micro stories. And in order to do that, the journalists at the district level, at the taluk level, at the village level, they need to be oriented. It's important to keep on investing in building the knowledge. And the third thing is that trying to create the bubbles of knowledge and information at the ground level, which media can tap, which can then finally travel, to the policymakers. Thank you, Vasanti.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Supriya ji. I think it's coming from a lot of rich experience that you have and some of the initiatives that you yourself have taken up. So it's not only for the media, but I think also for the ecosystem that is around to support the media, that you have given some very solid suggestions. We'll have a little more discussion on this in the question answer sessions. I also wanted to actually flag that our studies at CMS over the last 2 decades of monitoring the media and the CMS Envis Center up till 2019 showed that environment and related issues is still is totally insignificant through reporting on such issues. However, it has marginally increased over the years, even in prime time. So it's not that it's totally been ignored in the mainstream media as you're talking about. Agreed, in the districts and others it's a totally different story, but at least in the mainstream media at the national level, both in print and electronic media, it has over the years increased in terms of attention. However, today, with the changing media landscape, the opportunity to communicate, inform, inspire action on environmental issues has certainly increased. Our next speaker is someone who practices what she preaches and uses number of media vehicles to reach out to various audiences. The next speaker is Ms. Richa Anirudh, who's a well-known mainstream media personality with rich experience of hosting and producing both radio shows, television shows, and also online shows. Richa is the founder of Jamaghat Chat. I'm sorry, Richa, if I'm mispronouncing it, for Change, and an NGO called Mary Ladli. She's also the editor-in-chief of School Life magazine. She is known for her inspiring real-life stories and social campaigns that we all talked about, the positive stories. She actually does those and has won many awards for her programs and initiatives. So over to you, Richa. Can you share your experience and lessons in communicating ambitious environmental goals and campaigns to general public?
Thank you, Vasanti ji. So I would like to just break up my talk or my views into 3 parts. First, as a mainstream media, because I think I joined Hard News in 2002, and like till 2014-15, I was a news anchor, I was a talk show host on different news channels. And then I started now I have my own YouTube channel. I also do a radio show, as you mentioned. And as an individual, what efforts? So environment as a topic has been very close to my heart. But though your data says that, media coverage has improved, as a media professional, as a journalist myself, I feel that we haven't done enough. Every evening, if you watch a news channel, for years, I've been seeing, for several years, I don't see environment as one of the biggest concerns, of any media organization, and secondly, what hurts sometimes is that social activists or journalists pick up environment related issues according to their probably political affiliations and all that, whereas I feel that environment is a topic which should be totally apolitical. When it comes to discussing environment, we should only discuss that. So anyway, so I personally feel mainstream media hasn't done enough, but thankfully in past few years, since we have, as a media, we've got extensions in the form of digital media, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. So then it has given opportunity to a lot of people like me like Swati mentioned the word inspire. So apart from, so what I do as stories, my show Zindagi with Richa is on YouTube. We're going to start our 5th season. Every season, we've made it a point to feature at least one story of an environmentalist who's done good work. So probably you all might have heard of People Baba, about whom, the data says he's planted millions of trees because he's been planting trees since he was a child. And in Noida, I've personally seen how he's actually developing forests, in residential areas, and he's been given land by the government. And if you visit Noida, you go to Sorkha, Vanupvan, and you actually see an example of forestation by common people like us. So we featured him. Recently, I did a special series on Earth and Energy Heroes, and we went to Jharkhand to interview a woman called Jamuna Tudu, who was awarded Padma Shri last year. Supriya ji might know her. She's a rural woman. Her village doesn't have televisions. And around 12 years back, few women in the village decided, we will not let the villagers cut the trees. And so they've saved several acres of forest of their own, surrounding their own village. After doing that, and they actually used to go around in the forest with their bows and arrows to protect the forest from people who, try to cut the trees. So these are stories which need to, and how village women could take up this initiative. So I featured a lot of such people, not only forest, but, Afroz Shah, who works on the beaches to clean the beaches. So normally, I keep featuring these environment related stories, so that I feel as a media professional, that's my responsibility. On Big FM, the weekend show that I do, it's called Big Heroes. So again, from time to time, we keep featuring people who are doing something. So we've covered a lot of people, someone from Rajasthan who's turned a lot of, acres of land into forests. So we do a lot of those stories. Now coming to my individual efforts, because I personally feel, as I said, Swati also mentioned the word inspire. So we have that power of social media to inspire people. So I started a very simple thing in my personal life, that on my birthday, my daughter's birthday, and my niece's birthday, so 3 birthdays, and probably Holi, Diwali, or Republic Day, Independence Day, we go and plant trees. On birthday, the rule is to plant 1 tree more than my own age. So this year, if I turned 45, I planted 46 trees. And it's not only about plantation, because a lot of times we see in events, people plant trees and then they get dried up. I make it a point to plant those saplings at a place where they're taken care of or nurtured. So either it's with People Baba or some other organization, or around my house, my society, where I take care of them myself. And you won't believe, Vasanti ji, in fact, I want to share this. So a few months back, I had some work in the passport office, and I was on a call with a passport officer. And so he finished the whole conversation and he said, "Are you the same woman who planted 20 trees on your daughter's birthday recently? I saw the Facebook Live." So as we talked of the power of digital media, because I do Facebook Live every time I go for these plantations, the reach is like amazing. And I get so many people, response saying, we will also do this on my child's birthday. So it's not only about me planting trees. What I'm trying to do is to give a message to others also. Let's, on every occasion, let's just do this. And even if you plant 1 tree, please take care of it. You don't have to plant hundreds and thousands. And secondly, what I'm trying to do is to pass on this tradition to my youngsters, our next generation also, because I've told my daughter and my niece that you have to continue doing this all your life. I'm doing it right now for your birthdays, but then you have to continue it. So probably I feel as individuals, we need to promote every person in this world, not only India, that we need to take care of our plants, of our trees. And what I love about People Baba is that wherever he goes, he plants those indigenous trees and he creates a forest in those areas. So these are 3 things I want to say. Mainstream media, I'm not too happy with the coverage that we do. A lot of it is all political. Digital media still is doing better, because a lot of websites are promoting people. I'm just one of the many websites or shows who are promoting good people who are doing work for the environment. And as an individual, I think individual efforts also need to be highlighted.
Yeah, I think that's a common parallel coming from all the speakers about how we need to highlight individual efforts, community effort, and positive stories around that. So, thank you very much, Richa, for sharing that. I totally agree with your opinion on mainstream media, but there is a long way to go. But I think there is hope right there. Right now, it's in a very bad shape, but things will improve. I'm hopeful on that front. Well, environmental issues that require both action, both in terms of policy and in practice, as we've all talked about, individual initiatives need to be demystified and jargon free for all to understand. And that's one thing that I have noticed. We've done a series of workshops in the last 7-8 years with media with media colleagues, both in terms of workshops, what Supriya ji mentioned in terms of orientation at district level and at regional level, at state level, and at national level on various issues, whether it was climate change, whether it was the Himalayas, whether it was energy efficiency. We've been having these, and also fellowships, trying to work with individual selected fellows, giving them mentorship to explain them more about the complexity of the science behind the issues, like the simple terms like the jargon, for example. How do we not use certain jargon, and where do we need to use a certain jargon? uh, this gap between scientists, policymakers, and media is what we were trying to kind of bridge and bring them together, so that they can do, whenever they write the correct information first of all. Second of all, they write more and better stories on environmental issues, especially when they can connect to the people and the communities that they address. So, in fact, what we have done, and I'm sure many organizations, including CEE and IUCN, they are there to support and help media in this endeavor. We've also made manuals, web resources, and communication material readily available on various issues. I think beside these, there are many ways journalists can achieve and contribute. And here I want to bring in Miss Urmi Goswami to talk a little bit more about how can journalists support in achieving such national and international goals. And let's hear from her what she thinks, because I think after all the suggestions we've given her, she's the one who's in the newsroom. She is the assistant editor at the Economics Times. She reports and writes on environment, climate change, and sustainable development. She has attended and reported several international negotiations on environment and climate change, including the 2019 7th session of the IPBES plenary, 2011 Convention of Biodiversity COP, and 2015 Paris Climate Summit and the UN Environment Assembly. She's a regular participant in all discussions on such issues on AIR, Lok Sabha, and Rajya Sabha TV. So over to you, Urmi. What is your? I mean, you're the last but not the least most important speaker. In fact, trying to consolidate what we have hearing from all the various speakers and what their expectations from media is. What do you feel are the challenges, and how do you think we all can contribute in ensuring that media can do better stories, especially on landscape restoration?
Thank you, Vasanti ji, for that introduction and the framing, and thank you, Vivek, for having me on this webinar. I've been hearing through the program, and it's very difficult to quibble with both, whether it's with you, Vasanti, or Kartikeya ji, or our fellow journalists like Richa, on the characterization of the media. The truth is that environment has a huge struggle finding its place, and when environment does find place, it has to be more like a conflict story. It's almost like some version of the adage that dog bites man is not a story, but man bites dog is a story. So it's that kind of a situation. But the thing is that there are several aspects to this. So I'll start off with the micro stories, and then go from there. Now, at the micro level, there are the stories of things happening on the ground, efforts being made, and for that, stories, very often what happens is information comes in drabs and dribbles, and that becomes a bit of a problem. what is required is perhaps very often you could, if you had the ability to reach out to say several organizations and say, okay, I'm working on a story which relates to let's use this opportunity, say September 2nd, to do stories on efforts that are happening on FLR in India. Then can we get a sizable number of stories and perhaps make it like a bouquet of things that have happened? So it becomes like a showcasing. That's one thing. And there the problem becomes of access. Now it's true, IUCN exists, everybody knows IUCN exists, CMS Vatavaran exists, the CE exists, and there are others. But it's often that the bonds of communication have not been the strongest for some odd reasons. Also, sometimes it's the nature of the newspaper, because if somebody is sitting in the communications, doing the communications, and says, okay, I've been looking at the Economic Times, exactly how much space do they give to forestry? Or they don't give space. Should we spend the time getting in touch with the correspondent there? Would it help? And I think that's another problem. So it has to be, yes, you have to make that effort from both sides, both from the journalist end and from the organization's end. So that's one. Second is, can we take this conversation beyond just examples? So, consider the moment we are in the backdrop of COVID, which is basically a situation that has arisen because of enhanced human incursion into forested areas, wildlife habitats, and that is what has led to the current situation we're in. And yet, tell me how many stories you read about that being the center story. We don't. So there's that need to connect how FLR, the Bonn challenge and FLR actually helps in addressing this or counteracting this kind of a situation, if it does. So connecting those up. Third, we have been through the course of the past few years, but definitely past decades, but definitely so in the last, say, 5 years, with the Paris Agreement, the SDG 2015 SDG Summit, then the 2019, the IPBS report on the global assessment, the IPCC's 1.5 special report, or the report on land, the UNCCD COP that happened. We are getting a greater understanding of how human beings are literally cutting off the branch they're sitting on. So there is a huge economic value to where these activities that we are talking about, say under Bonn challenge. It's not just about it is not just about restoration of ecosystem, planting more trees, as I think Swati mentioned. It's not, but how that translates into real economics for you, or real issues of water scarcity. I think that's where the trick is, that we have to start connecting to things that people can, and when I mean people, I mean editor chiefs, because when a reporter goes with the story, the first audience is the bureau chief, and then the editor. So if I have convinced these two layers, then I get the story out, and then I'm talking about convincing readers. Sometimes it might be easier to convince the readers, but the big gauntlet that I have to sort of, deal with is the challenge I have is convincing these 2 or 3 layers of people who vet your story or vet the idea. How do I connect the two? Kartikeya mentioned about COVID and the numbers that were being spoken about. The one reason why, besides the fact that it's a global pandemic, the scale is not just global but massive. We're talking about health, people's life, people being ill, people dying. We were able to relate to something that is so real. It did it for itself, but the fact is that it is because of that you were able to find that connect. Think about Ebola. Tell me how many stories on Ebola did we read in Indian newspapers? Because we didn't make that connect. or how many stories do we read about, people dying from diarrhea, and we don't make that connect. So the question really is about how do we connect. So again, when it comes to the Bonn challenge, it talks about forestation, reforestation, dealing with land degradation. We have to find a way to make that connect, and it in a sense it's easier now to make the connect because there's so much conversation on the economic value of nature. There is so much conversation on what ecosystem degradation and loss means in terms of water. Again, that itself opens up to a subject that people can relate to, or clean, or what it means for clean air. Again, another subject people can relate to. So I think what is required by media is a lot of a lot of interaction with experts, organizations, but looking beyond just examples, looking at it in terms of the issue and how we can relate. And once you start making those relationship connections, we can then people it with examples of people who are doing taking action on the ground, and how that impacts each of these factors, whether it's water, air, livelihoods. But we have to make those connects, and I think that is where our focus should be, and that is where I think if we can make that connect, then the media, then we can see at least a broader coverage of these issues in what we will call mainstream media. Definitely in the print you will see more space being given. I cannot vouch for television, but I'm sure that if there is something like this, if we can find those connects, I'm sure even there will be a change. And of course, the digital space is there, which even mainstream media organizations are now using their websites. So that means, in terms, we can have a smaller story in print, but a bigger outlay in the digital version. These are the three areas I think that we should be focusing on and working on together to achieve the intent which both Swati and Vivek mentioned right at the top of the program, that to inspire, to elucidate, to make clarify, and to make it relevant. So that's for me for the moment, and I'm of course happy to elucidate further and take questions when they come. Thank you, Vasanti ji.
Yeah, sorry again. Thanks, Urmi. I think that was absolutely well explained about the challenges that you face in the newsroom and the three issues that you highlighted. And one, I want to kind of take off from where you left on how we have the digital spaces that are available, and how we can elaborate further and make the connections that you talked about, going beyond examples. After you have obviously access to the right information and right experts who you can talk to and make the whole connections and connect the dots, is to give a long form stories that are now missing in at least the mainstream media, both whether it's television or it's in print or it's on radio. But also now the digital space is opening up this particular opportunity, and this constraint of space has now been overcome by giving this long form of journalism back into picture. So I think that's a great opportunity for people like you and others who are now interested in this issue and are taking it forward. This is a time for all participants to send me their questions so that I can raise open the panel and have some question and answers. There are certain comments that are coming in, and I think
Vasanti ji, if I could make one quick
yes,
one quick thing.
Go ahead,
it
please.
Struck me. One of the things we should be doing is creating a system of support. So, how do we amplify our voice? And we can use social media for that. So say you do something, and not just as CMS Vatavaran, but you write something. Then basically I amplify it through my own space. I write something, then Richa amplifies it. So it becomes like a network of amplifying our voices. True. Because in a sense, we have to use James Scott's weapons of the weak if we really want to get these stories out. And And we are in that sense, we all are working towards the same. And there are so many stories, so we are in a non-compete
Absolutely.
situation.
I completely agree with you,
The
Urmi.
more stories, the better.
That's a brilliant suggestion, actually. I don't know why we didn't think about it, because we are in a minority. Even in the media space, we are very few people who are interested in this issue. So it's actually a fantastic idea to kind of develop the system of support and a network where we can amplify each other. Brilliant suggestion, Urmi. I think Swati wants to come in. Do you want to say something, Swati?
Yeah, actually, I was going to say, Urmi, you mentioned the LDN targets, UNFCCC and the SDGs, and then you made this excellent suggestion of a coalition of journalists talking about it. So I thought now might be a good moment to say that on September 2nd, one of the things that IUCN will be sharing, which would be a really great example of what the media can take up, is actually a rapid analysis of how Bonn Challenge commitments line up with the commitments that countries have made to the Paris Agreement, to the land degradation neutrality goal, and to the CBD IG targets. And so what I can do after that analysis is released on September 2nd is I can actually share it with all of you. And I think we can put your idea, how can we get a long form article in place that really explains these issues and how can we leverage support to promote it. And then the second thing I would say is when it comes to information on how to connect forest landscape restoration and the Bonn Challenge to people's daily lives, IUCN, both the India team and the global team, is really excited and happy to share all the information and data we have. I think Dr. Saxena can talk about it a bit more, but for September 2nd, many states in India submitted very good concrete examples of FLR progress. And I can also share data from the barometer with all of you, which talks very strongly about livelihoods as well. So just an opportunity that we can pick up on from this panel itself.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I should encourage everybody to participate tomorrow and day after to learn more about this. I think that I wanted to actually share also a quick thing before I go on to Kartik Bhai, because there are a couple of questions that are coming on children. I wanted to mention that during the lockdown and after lockdown, because the schools are closed, we did series of competitions with children, especially on video, 1 minute and 3 minute videos, and the reaction was such a tremendous one in terms of trying to understand very complex issues of biodiversity, for example, or climate change, or the impact of COVID, was absolutely fabulous. And I think this whole concept of using children, I think there are two questions or two comments that have been come from Jyotsna Garg and Sangeeta Bajpal, who are talking about children and how they not only engaging children in such efforts of conservation, but also making them brand ambassadors for issues and making them the vehicle of change, just like we're trying to do with the media. How can we involve children? And here I wanted to bring in Kartik Bhai, because I think CE has done tremendous work in trying to bring in how we can engage with children and the formal and the informal school systems into this whole media landscape of conservation. Over to you, Kartik Bhai. You are mute.
Yeah, sorry. I just thank you. I think as someone also in the chat box has said, the children are really very critical in this, and I'm sort of putting children and youth in a sense together, yes, because both those groups are very critical to do this. In the rural areas, what we have been able to manage is that the school has been able to discuss and negotiate with the panchayat to get an area which the school takes up to a forest. And that has been a very successful program. We also grow a number of medicinal plants there besides the trees. And if you can grow something which people directly relate to, this is what happens is the parents say that when you go to school, uski do patti le aana, just bring some leaves of this or bring some. So it's not an isolated experiment. It's something which they can see the value of, because so many things, and we involve traditional knowledge through the local vibe. We are calling this project Sanjeevani, and the local vibe gets involved. So there is a concept of a tradition. There's a concept of what the village sees as requirement, either for the food. It could be something which they've always used to, but they no longer can find for their cooking. And suddenly they find that the school can also do that. So getting people involved in biodiversity and other things is possible. In the school itself, one of the problems, as was mentioned by some of the other speakers, has been looking after rather than planting, because there's been a whole emphasis on just planting. And I think Richa also mentioned how for the birthdays you plant, but you also look after them and see them after a year. And I think that's very important. And I did mention in my earlier talk that today, because of satellite, one can even visit a plantation and see whether something's happening. I mean, it's not online all the time, but it still gives you some ideas. So I think children doing activities, students doing activities, relating it to their schools and their parents, I think is a very important part of this. While I have the floor, I just wanted to mention two quick other points.
Yes.
One was that we were discussing about doing stories on the environment, but another way of doing it is to bring in the environmental factor in regular stories.
That's true.
So I think what you need to do is also teach people whatever story they are doing. And I think Swati, was it you or someone who mentioned how the Bombay floods, Bombay issue, you don't bring in mangroves into it. Now there's no mention of mangroves in that story. So rather than treat it as a separate environment story, and usually what happens is that the newspaper has someone who is on the environment beat. So they are supposed to do the environment story. Someone else does the economic stories. What you want is that the mainstream people, whether it's a political, economic story, many of the rivalries which you see politically are in fact to do with controlling a resource, controlling a water resource, controlling some other resource. So I think we need to make the transition from environmental journalists, which are required, to also bringing in environmental analysis abilities to the other journalists, especially in this case, we're talking about forests and what the impact is. And then finally, I wanted to say that today children are also getting very used to being warned about fake news. And there's a whole lot of fake things. I think one of the things which, again, IUCN or someone can do is to say which are some of the standard websites from which, relating to forests in India or relating to what we are doing, which are the websites which one could look at and get fairly accurate information. And this could be your members, could be some particular government sites. So what happens is that any journalist who's working on this knows that we use, like you got your red data book, you have got a green sites book or something, which means that if it's an IUCN certified site, I feel confident of using it. And this could be another communication part of what IUCN could do. And everyone who would want to be on that, to have the privilege of being listed in the IUCN green book or whatever, not the red book, but the green book of IUCN sites. So something like that, Swati, even internationally can be done. And you could do it here. Because I think it is very difficult for individuals to know which statistics to believe. And I think this was two suggestions. Thank you,
so both are brilliant suggestions. And Kartikeya, I just wanted to add to that the second one, in terms of actually coming up with these publications, there are already a lot of material. That's exactly what IUCN does, what CMS does. I'm sure you have a lot of material already ready on various issues. These just doesn't have access, as Urmi said, to reach out to the right one. Perhaps the network would help in actually reaching out to the right journalists. And the second point that you made about bringing in the environment factors in regular stories, actually that was my last final comment that I wanted to give in. So I'm glad you did it. You explained it brilliantly. I'm getting a lot of comments again in terms
Vasanti ji, can I just pitch in a little?
I'll just bring you in because I wanted to actually bring in some of the participants. For example, Monica Srivastav is talking about advertisements and spots and short public service messages as raising environmental consciousness. And then there was Shanmuga Sundara Bharti, who's talking about how can we connect organizations' work like IUCN, WWF, and share it with the media, because this interaction, and I think Urmi also mentioned and some others also spoke about how the interaction between what the good work is happening and with the media is not so smooth and perhaps needs to be worked upon. I think I'll leave the questions now and I'll take the final comments from each of the panelists because the time is up and we need to kind of wind up. So thank you all for participation, but let me hand it over now to Richa, and others will follow with the final comments and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you.
So I just wanted to add to what Kartikeya ji was saying. When we talk about children, as I said, I don't feel mainstream media has done enough, but schools are actually, I've noticed in past few years, schools have actually put in a lot of effort in inspiring children, because so they call a lot of environmentalists as speakers, as chief guests to the schools. So I know one person called Rakesh Khatri ji. Few years back, he noticed that Delhi doesn't have sparrows. He didn't see many sparrows, and he started making sparrow nests. And now he goes to thousands of schools and teaches children how to make sparrow nests. So it's a very small initiative, but through a sparrow nest, he teaches children so much about the need of trees, biodiversity, and all of that. So I personally say that we must appreciate the efforts that the schools right now are making, because what is important is that the next generation should get this message loud and clear from all of us, and we should give them a greener forest cover when we leave this planet. So I think there, we as parents, society, media, of course, and schools, we all have a role to play.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for saying that. Over to you, Supriya ji. Do you have any comments to make?
Yeah, Vasanti, I just wanted to highlight that it's also very important that the role of indigenous communities. Richa mentioned about the school, but I personally know that there are so many indigenous communities because their lives are very intricately linked with the entire conservation issue, afforestation or conservation issues. And so often what happens is that when the media reports about the conservation issues, afforestation, they actually do not mention about the role that is being played by the indigenous communities.
Absolutely.
I think that is where I think the disconnect, a bit of a disconnect happens. And therefore, that is why I'm again emphasizing on my point that perhaps Vivek may like to consider, in certain important districts, for example, in Nilgiris, whether IUCN would like to have an environment desk with the district collector, so that the capacities of 2-3 very young people, indigenous community people, could be built up to bring out the stories of resilience and things which can inspire not only India but the whole world. Thank you.
That's a very, very important point. Thank you for highlighting
Vasanti ji,
that.
can
Yes,
I just...
Urmi. I was coming to you, Urmi. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to follow on what Supriya just said. One is that point she makes about empowering district reporters. That's great, but I've also seen that at the national level and state level, I've seen this on pollution, that it has been an uphill task. First, it was at the national level, but definitely continues to be sometimes even at state level. So I can imagine how much of an uphill struggle it's going to be. Perhaps, we have to do both a bit of trickle down and an empowering from the bottom. So it's about connecting to the national and then also connecting at it, so that some viable stories to do. And so that's one. The other point that Kartikeya mentioned about reaching out to other reporters who are doing economic and political stories, I think I would like to just sort of have a little modification of that. And I think that because that creates the kind of problems that is why sometimes environment stories fall through the cracks. It becomes what is the turf war between reporters. So perhaps one of the things we should also be doing is empowering environment reporters to be looking at angles which go beyond just environmental. So they're able to better push their stories. So then it doesn't come at war, because we often see this when the issue becomes big, the political reporter comes and takes it over, and that is very demoralizing for an environment reporter. So it's about working together but about empowering. And one final point, I know I mentioned it earlier, but I think we need to have a flow of information, up, down, knowing what to access, that tomorrow, let's say, I think there's a story to be done on work that is being done. So the whole thing that Supriya mentioned about indigenous communities doing, but I should be able to know, okay, these are the I can reach out to, because I'm not doing these stories on a regular basis, but it's something to engage with. So better flow information. I don't know how we can do it collectively, but that's something we should be working to.
I think we've been doing that for quite a while now, but just means that we are not doing it enough. We need to strengthen our information inflow. Over to Swati and Vivek ji for the final comments before I wind up. Swati?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I just wanted to say this has given me personally a lot of interesting ideas and tells me that over the next couple of months, when I'm working on the barometer in different countries or releasing news and analysis, that there's a couple of things that as a IUCN we can do. So one is to really send journalists very clear data And then I really liked your point, Urmi, on making connections with other topics. I think if from this webinar we can come away with the agreement that FLR and the Bonn Challenge aren't just the sole domain of environment reporters, but need to be focused by experts talking about agriculture, talking about rural development, talking very much about indigenous communities. So I really agree with that. Then we will actually be able to mainstream this idea. I would just say that in around 24 hours on September 2nd, for a full day, we will actually be profiling a lot of restoration stories. There will be many interesting angles that the media can pick up. So I would really encourage everyone to join in on that event. It's entirely online. There are 6 live panels in addition to the other 2 webinars that the India office is organizing. And if you go on Twitter or Facebook and you type in Restore Our Future, you will see just a sheer wealth of data coming out from countries. And then I'd just like to reiterate that the IUCN teams are here to support and share information. And Kartikeya, you asked some really interesting questions on spatial data monitoring. And I think it would be really helpful if maybe Dr. Vivek, the IUCN India team, and I followed up with you, because we are indeed looking at spatial data monitoring. So there's a good area for collaboration there.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Swati, and thank you for joining us early in the morning. Over to you,
Of
Vivek.
course.
Dr. Vivek, are you there?
Thank you, Vasanti, and thank you all the panelists. And certainly very good discussion was generated during today's webinar, especially the suggestion by Supriya that regarding the media education at the local level, how to train the media people what to report, the micro stories. Just like, for example, you have some sort of a waste management, some of the RWAs, they are segregating waste. These are the small challenges of the urban areas, because ultimately at the international level, what we talk, the big jargons like IPBS, UNCCP, and all this FLR maybe now, ultimately nature has to be told in a very simplest form. And the simplest form is wherever we reside at the local action, we have to ensure in our surrounding what we contribute towards making the air cleaner, what we contribute so that the water sources we don't make dirty, how do we recycle this? And that should be the way of life, and especially with the school education thing, the Kartikeya's organization is doing promoting the school children. If they are all sensitized and such type of a small stories at the grassroots level, they are focused. And Richa ji, just through the media, how to motivate people that the plant which they plant, and also to take care, so that for the future generation we leave a greener earth. Urmi ji rightly emphasized that type of space which we need to get for the environmental issues, and how to make these environmental stories more interesting, rather than just projecting that somehow the negative aspect of the thing, that okay, the air has become so polluted. So it is not only we can blame the state actors that they are responsible. It is our collective responsibility, each and every one of us, how much we are contributing. And if we are doing something good, that needs to be showcased. And that's why this nature-based solutions has the thing, the nature-inspired solutions, nature-based solutions, and nature-derived solutions. Ultimately, you have to ensure the connect with the nature. Absolutely. And with this Bonn Challenge Global Media Campaign, I would like that, taking a clue from the today's deliberations, I think it is not just a planting of the trees, the Bonn Challenge. You have to have think on the landscape basis, and that will involve each and every aspect, maybe the planting, improving the soil health, ensuring the cleaner air, water sources cleaner, and also involving the community, so that green livelihoods are also generated and everyone takes part of it. So I will just brief you about the 2 successive webinars apart from the global media campaign, which Swati just mentioned on 2nd of September, which we are organizing. And to motivate people, we have the best of the possible at this stage. The speakers tomorrow, Shri Ravi Shankar ji will be part of our webinar, and also Eric Solem, the former UNEP executive director and the well-known environmentalist. So I will just show you the brief background flyer for the 2 webinars. Piyush, can you just show the background flyer for the 1st September webinar? Can you zoom it a little bit? So tomorrow we have Shri Ravi Shankar ji, Eric Solem, then Director General of National Mission for Clean Ganga, because of along the rivers, lot of the river based landscape restoration, that initiatives have been taken. Then Mr. Siddhant Das, who was the former Director General of the Forest and Special Secretary, and the former member of the National Green Tribunal, and now presently he has joined Odisha recently only. And Dr. T.P. Singh is the Deputy Regional Director from IUCN Regional Office. From the corporate sector, the ITC corporate has taken a number of initiatives for the agri-scape. Dr. Savita, who was a Principal Chief Conservator of Forest and Chief Wildlife Warden from Himachal Pradesh, he will be there, and along, she has also been the first women director of the Forest Research Institute, Dehradun. Then we have from the down south, Principal Chief Conservator of Forest from the Karnataka, Dr. Sanjay Mohan, and then Mr. Sumit. He is also co-founder of the Global Village Foundation and is doing a lot of activities related to the environmental issues. So this is the tomorrow's our webinar session, 1st September, 16:30 hours, same time. And now coming back to the 2nd September, when parallelly we will have a global media campaign, and that where we will also be showcasing the various case studies. Sadhguruji will be giving the video message, and also Minister Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Prakash Javadekar ji, will be giving video messages. And the Mr. Ricky Cage, who is also with the UNESCO, and also he is the Grammy Award winner, he will be there. Then Mr. Siddharth Sharma from the Tata Group. Tata Group has taken a number of initiatives for the biodiversity conservation and restoration. And representing government will be Mr. Jigme Takka. He's a joint secretary and also the United Nations Convention Combat Desertification focal point. And Mr. BMS Rathore, he was earlier with the Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change as a joint secretary, and he is now presently Chief Policy Advisor at the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development at Kathmandu. Then Mr. Lokesh Jaswal, additional PCCF from the Telangana, and Mr. Deepak Kumar Singh, he is the Principal Secretary, Government of Bihar. Then from the UP, you might have heard that UP recently created a Guinness Book, another milestone by planting 240 species on a single day, 1 crore saplings. Apart from that, some record regarding the number of saplings which were planted in one day, and the biodiversity aspect through the Guinness Book also by planting so many species. So it is in next 2 days, we will have a eminent panelist on our webinar series to make people. And just I forgot, we will also have our global forest director from the IUCN Global Office, Mr. Stuart Magnus, who will be joining from the global. He's the head of the IUCN Global Forest Program and also this Global Bonn Challenge Program. And Mr. Pradeep Monga, he's a Deputy Executive Secretary from the United Nations Convention for Combat Desertification from the UNCCD Secretariat Bonn. So it is a galaxy of panelists, eminent panelists who are working in this field just with the aim that more message should go down below. And here the role of the media also is very, very important. And the issues which were deliberated today during today's discussion, I think they will be certainly very helpful. And the key messages with all the eminent panelists, experience in all type of media, like the print, electronic, social media, and through the civil society organizations, and through the another form of media through which Dr. Vasanti also leads it. I think this campaign over this period of 3 days, it will be successful. And on behalf of IUCN, I am once again very much thankful that all of you accepted our invitation at such a short notice and really made today's webinar very successful. And once again, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Vivek.
Thank you.
I'd like to also personally thank each and every panelist for their very interesting inputs and suggestions about how we can enrich this dialogue that will continue and strengthen this information flow and engagement among stakeholders, not just between us. I hope the FLR and the Bonn challenge help us strengthen our engagements on environmental issues. So thank you for your inputs and sharing your experiences. I want to thank IUCN and their office and also all the participants. I would like to apologize to all of them who I could not take up and respond, but I think this is very important. Please do join us tomorrow and day after so that you can perhaps share again your comments and suggestions on this. all I want to kind of say is we have to do something now. Otherwise, all of us, if we don't, our quality of life and our children's will be worse off than what it is today. So let's work together, and we're all there for each other. Do reach out to each other. And thanks again for participating in today's webinar. Thank you and namaskar. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.